Well, hello and welcome to Beyond the Index, which is a new 6-part video series which serves as your strategic compass for navigating today's fast-moving B2B world. This content series, which we're really excited about, is powered by Dentsu B2B's 5th iteration of the Global Superpowers Index, the largest global study of B2B buyer behaviour, bringing insights from over 16,000 B2B buyers across the globe and 35,000 brand experiences. So we really do have all the insights available to help B2B marketers and business leaders understand exactly what it takes to win. Beyond the Index takes a deeper dive into key topics with experts from across our own business and leaders from the B2B marketing community. So let's dive straight in. My name is Jennings. I am Head of Growth for Dentsu B2B in the UK, and I'm thrilled to be leading the conversation today on the topic of personalisation. An ever-evolving topic, I'm sure you'll agree, and I'm delighted to be able to combine our experiences with some of the findings that are hot off the press from our Superpowers research. Very pleased to be joined by two hugely passionate B2B marketers. We have Mimi Turner, Head of Marketing Innovation at LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, Marketplace Innovation, sorry Mimi, and Tim Lamble, our very own Managing Partner for Dentsu B2B Media. So it would be great if you would both, introduce yourselves, your experiences that have led to this point, and why this was a conversation that you were particularly eager to take part in. Mimi, shall I come to you?
Well, I think that'll take the whole of the rest of the podcast, so let's stop there. First of all, so I'm the Head of Marketplace Innovation at LinkedIn, and I spent probably 4 years at LinkedIn. Before that, I was the Director of Strategy and Messaging and Research at the Liberal Democrats. Before that, I was the first marketing director of the Lad Bible. So and before that, I was in politics and journalism. They almost couldn't be more B2C. And the transition to B2B is really because I think B2B has fundamentally unanswered questions. We don't know how to behave when we are trying to project ourselves into the mind of our customers. In B2C, I pretty much know that Calvin Klein underpants, Jeremy Allen White, I understand the customer promise that's been made in that. I have absolutely no idea whose underpants I get to look at if I buy a CRM system. And if we don't understand the emotion exchange, we just don't understand anything. So I'm really attracted by that. And I spend my time doing research projects, kind of in the vein of the Superpowers work, which I personally love. I just want to spend another 20 minutes talking about how much I love the Superpowers work. But I think what you guys have really nailed is the buyer's perspective. I think if you'd said we surveyed 20,000 marketers, I'd be like, okay, well, that's probably interesting. But actually, understanding marketers is not very customer-centric. Understanding buyers is entirely customer-centric. So I think that the work I do is a sort of complement, and it follows there is a band of emerging thinkers about how do we win in B2B. And it starts with the buyer, it starts with complex buyer groups, it starts with organizational incentives, which are quite different from individual human incentives. And all of those things mean that I do think this is an absolutely fascinating strategic business challenge, growth challenge, but also it's a behavioral challenge. And that means that human behaviors will win. And where human behaviors win, you want to get a person like me, because I kind of like that kind of thing.
This is why we are delighted that you're here, Mimi. Thank you so much. And Tim?
Oh, what an intro. So yeah, hi, I'm Tim Lamble, so as you said, Managing Partner for Dentsu B2B Media. So my responsibility is to make sure that we deliver incredible output for our clients day in, day out, making sure all the client teams have what they need. And this is my 20th year in media, always agency side, always global. And apart from a year or two right at the beginning, I've always been in B2B. So I like to think, I was in B2B long before it was cool. I think we're seeing a real growth in focus from a lot of agencies and a lot of brands in their B2B capability. There's a huge opportunity. And I think what really drives me day in, day out for the work that we do is obviously effectiveness. It is a service industry. We want to make sure we deliver the best for our clients. But also, I think what's I'm really proud of that we deliver at Dentsu B2B is that kind of human element. So we'll come to touch on this, I think, throughout the rest of the podcast. But, in those last 18 years, very few of the clients that I've worked with outside of Dentsu have really delivered on the promise of talking to humans. And almost everybody in B2B is a human, thankfully. Yeah, there are a few.
Right that way.
Yeah, exactly. It is fantastic that we bring that kind of perspective to B2B. We humanize it. We try and talk about emotion, personal kind of needs, and that's where I think Superpowers is really strong as well. And so anything where we're able to bring that kind of personalization and cross that with effectiveness, and of course we know that when we deliver personalized stuff, it is more effective. That for me is the intersection of what makes me proud and passionate to be part of Dentsu B2B.
And if you are not a passionate follower of the Superpowers work, now is the time to, I'm sure there's a link that you can find, but it is really, really, I would say, a definitive piece of work about buyer motivations and trends. And I'm super excited I already put it in my calendar for the next launch.
Wow, there we go. Oh my gosh. Well, it's not as if we prepared ourselves for this, but you have both teed me up beautifully. So I think, listen, a really sensible place to start is why it is important to be personal. So you both touched on the human element. We know that personalized marketing, account-based experiences is likely on all marketing teams' agendas, okay? It's going to be a strategic imperative. It's going to be something that involves technology, involves data. But what you touched on, Mimi, around the buyers is exactly where I thought would be a lovely place to start, hence the cue cards, because I don't want to get any of our latest insights incorrect. But what we know from the Superpowers Index, and remember this is 35,000 now brand experiences across the globe, what we know is that the brands that win, so we talk to our buyers and we talk to them about the process they've been through, what drivers stood out from the suppliers they were engaging with, which suppliers went forward, which suppliers were discounted. What we know when we get to the end of that process, where of course a supplier is awarded a contract and hopefully goes on to have an excellent partnership with the client as their supplier, those brands that win communicate via more personal touch points during the decision-making process, post higher overall brand experience scores from the buyers than those that don't deliver personalised communication. There's a difference of 74 versus 67 in our index scoring. But as we've seen in previous years, there is still this two-sided coin and this wrestle between what buyers are telling us and what marketers think that they are delivering. Now, that is absolutely not to say that we're doing a bad job as a marketing community, but I think it's very interesting to pick up on the differences that we see there. So when we talk to the buyers, so of a wide range of B2B products and services, 75% of them are still a little bit frustrated, clearly telling us that they would like business suppliers to spend more time seeking to understand them and how they can help to solve the day-to-day problems that they face at work. 68% agree that many of the brands they see at work have very similar marketing communications messages, all sounding and acting the same. So that's the buyers, that's what the buyers are telling us. And actually that trend has continued through the 5 years that we've been doing this survey. Then when we flip to the other side and we talk to the B2B marketers, who are of course still buyers of products and services, but we understand their role and the responsibility that they have, 68% are rating themselves as being strong at personalising the marketing experiences offered to their customers. And 57% say that focusing on these personal tactics it allows them to report considerably higher revenue growth compared to the previous year. So if I come to you first, Mimi, because of course your extensive work with marketers, practitioners, academics, and I know you do such a lot into buyer groups and how those decisions are made. What's your take on that sort of differing, perhaps, perspective from the buyers and the marketers?
I think it's really interesting. I think it's also worth saying that I think personalisation is a very scary word if you're a marketer, because all of a sudden you're thinking, like, I've got 1 million customers, how does that work? And I don't think of it in that way. I think that what buyers are looking for, and we've seen this over and over in our research, and I think there are echoes in your research, which is buyers are looking for companies that relate to them. They're actually trying to, the heuristic that cuts through the B2B buyer experience is, did you do well for a buyer like me in a company like mine. So rather than personalisation with Mimi, I know, instead of getting, I don't know, Gary Lineker, let's get somebody in a Diane von Furstenberg dress because Mimi that's her level of personalisation. That's irrelevant. Mm-hmm. What we want in B2B buying is not to get fired. The number one driver of success in a decision, in a buying decision, is I want to buy something that's a decision I can defend if it goes wrong. In our research, people wanted that even more than buying a product that can do the job. And if you think about that, that's kind of an insight, isn't it? You know, like we all think that buying the product that can do the job is the basic. Like that's what everybody wants. They want one thing more, and that's where the human behavioural understanding comes in. If you don't understand that, you'll break your back trying to persuade everybody that your product can do the job. That's not the final hurdle. The final hurdle is, can I defend myself? So the principal way to defend a decision is that companies like us use this product. That's what brand is. A big brand is something that lots of people use. The bigger the brand in B2B, the more it is. Lots of people use this brand and did not get fired. Ergo, it's safe. So brand is a proxy for other people not getting fired. And once you understand that, you can actually cut through the 67 levels of PhD stack economics or whatever it is, because that's all you need to do to win. To win isn't easy, but it's not a guess either. And so when I think of personalisation, I think much more of how many relational signals can you display to me to make me as the buyer feel that companies like us did not go wrong with you. Because B2B buying is different because it's a group-based buying. It's an organisational buy. It doesn't matter what I think. If my boss has a crazy, stupid idea, I'm sure my boss isn't going to be watching this, but let's say, let's say like my boss in previous jobs has a crazy, stupid idea and he's really on it. Am I going to challenge him and say, no, I will take the responsibility if you fail? Absolutely not. You know, we have all these skewy incentives, so we need a central point of being able to defend a decision. And in our research, the number one defense of a decision was companies like us recommended it. So I would say that's your avenue of personalization, not like, you know, because I don't know, customers don't know really what they want, but when you track outcomes, you see that more of these dimensions correlated with purchase behavior. Even when you do survey-based questions, right? People are just not very, very unreliable narrators of what they're actually saying. So if you infer, you can find a better kind of model for success.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so much to unpack there, Mimi, but also within the superpowers, we talk about trust, we talk about safety. And I think all of those are components of brand. Yeah. And as you say, you know, you feel safe signing that contract, you feel that you trust that brand. These are all the things that year on year have been right up there in terms of what buyers need.
Yeah, just one thing before, and I know Tim has some really interesting points on this, but we've coined this phrase buyability because we want to lock in understanding what makes B2B brands, products, services buyable. And once you focus on buyability, you cannot wander very far from the buyer's perspective. The problem that we have in marketing now is that it's very kind of pipeline driven. It's like the sales pipeline decides the story. And we have this idea that brand is up here as a sort of, you know, tell me your emotions and like, you know, let's have some music to tell us how we're feeling. And then let's get the big guys in from sales and lead gen and they close the deal. Trust, which is a socially constructed thing, constructed from other people's opinions, trust matters more the closer the buyer gets to making a decision. Brand, when it is expressed through trusted recommendations, relatable people saying it worked for us, and a stronger perspective on relatability is what closes deals. It might be useful at the beginning, but it's essential at the end. And without buyability, leads don't convert into closed-won deals, and that is a huge problem for marketers right now in B2B.
I couldn't agree more, and I think, you know, we there's a joke in media, obviously, that every survey says that peer-to-peer recommendations at the top of everything when you see why people make a product in B2C and B2B. It's there for a reason, and I think, you touched on it, but in our 5th iteration, again, we have had a lot of, in our 30 both professional and personal decision drivers that we see and survey in superpowers, we have a lot of movement year on year as things like COVID hit and people move to more rational decisions, and then after that more personal decisions, and actually this year I think potentially back to more rational decisions. The one thing that's been consistent is trust. It has never gone from that number one spot, and so I totally agree with you that is critical that we deliver. I think what's the interesting nuance of how we deliver that in media is how we align that trust to what individuals need. So I agree with you, that kind of emotive piece can play a part at a brand level, but being able to identify what an organisation is going through at what buying stage, who is involved in that decision, and delivering the trust that they need at that stage, I think is really important. So, that is where I think there's a lot of difficulty often, that marketers maybe stop just short of that hyper-personalisation of, not necessarily, to your point, my personal needs as an individual, but my trust as an organisation, as a buyer group. What do we know about the organisation? Where are they at? And the intelligence to be able to deliver that, I think, is the challenge that we have. And I know we'll come to talk about how we can overcome some of those, but that for me is probably the barrier where you have that difference between the statistics you read out, which is that a lot of marketers think they are delivering that personalisation, but a lot of buyers themselves don't necessarily feel that their needs are met.
There is this thing for marketers, your job is sort of to get into the consideration set, and then it's somebody else's job. And actually that creates this kind of tension between brand and demand. And it also means that the marketer stops being credited for anything beyond that process. And that creates a sense of a false incentive to create loads and loads of consideration and then hope that it's somebody else's job. And what happens, and why trust, which is socially constructed, matters more when you're on the shortlist, you make it to the shortlist, it's because that's when all the hidden buyers inside an organisation, if you're not really targeting with the product or product knowledge, they play a part. And something, Joe from procurement just doesn't care if you guys are the hottest AI cloud solution for cybersecurity. They're like, well, have I heard of these guys? Because if I haven't heard of these guys, maybe we don't want to get into a long-term strategic partnership with them. And that process actually, I think, is a lot more like an Indian wedding. It's just like, like when Indians have been doing buyer group decision making a lot for like several centuries. So, they're all in the strategic alliance business. And they ask exactly the same questions. Like, your dad wants to know, you just want to know, is your husband a good kisser? You can care less. He wants to know, what's his finances? Where's his bank statement? What is his, what is his financial runway? Has he got his 7 rounds of funding? And this is a deeply human process at its heart. Winning over the buyer group requires each of them to believe that you have credibility, whether it's financially, whether it's legally, whether it's in terms of sustainability. And everything kind of factors into that. So that process of building trust with the buyer group is done massively by brand. And it's done by accident. That's the other thing. Unless you actually understand that that's part of your process, the biggest brands win because Joe from procurement has heard from them. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM, tells you exactly what buyers want to buy. But I think there is a way for smaller players to win by understanding that they have to play the buyer group and they have to prove that they're more liked and more trusted than the other people on the shortlist. That's actually how you win.
Yeah, super. Well, I knew we'd be constrained by time because honestly, we could go on, but I think, what we deeply are passionate about in Superpowers is making sure the insights are actionable. It is so important for us that, yes, we have the scale, yes, we have that buyer understanding, but we really we spend so much time really trying to think about how we make those insights as actionable as possible so that our clients and other marketers who are engaging with the insights can really use them to pinpoint areas of development and areas of improvement within their own activations. And so I guess we come to this ever-evolving challenge of how to be personal. We've talked a lot about what it means to be personal, the role of brand, the role of trust, the role of awareness and feeling safe engaging with that organisation or that supplier. But I think for everybody listening and watching this conversation, I'm sure is eager to get some sort of takeaways and some inspiration as to what they can take back to their teams and their peers across the organisation. So if I root us in Superpowers, because it would be, of course, rude not to, Superpowers data is reporting that segmenting customers and delivering value marketing, and what we mean by that is marketing that aligns and optimises value propositions to customer needs, were only actually cited as being key strategic actions for the year ahead by 15% of the B2B marketers that we spoke to. Now I started to tussle with this. Is this that personalisation is now kind of BAU? It's always on. It's something that is ingrained in those teams. Or have we actually got a bit of a definition challenge here in terms of what being personal means and what personalised marketing communications actually are? If we dive a bit deeper to those B2B marketers who were obviously surveyed as buyers, 75% have mapped the customer journey. They feel comfortable with the path to purchase that they've identified, and they understand, or they tell us they understand, the critical touch points and improvement areas. 74% are using buyer personas to better target and communicate with the different customer types. We talk about the buyer groups. And 70% are confident that they're already developing compelling and relevant content for their customers and prospects. But of course, 68% of our buyers were telling us that they're seeing the same. So, Tim, if I come to you on this one, what are you hearing and what are we talking to clients most about when it comes to how to deliver and what is needed to deliver personalised communications?
It's a great question. I mean, for as long as I've been in marketing, account-based marketing or target account list targeting has been a thing. LinkedIn have obviously been a great partner in being able to reach our target organizations and even hyper-target on different buying groups. But I think where we are really seeing challenges and actually an advantage for our clients is being able to orchestrate that in a more kind of collective way end to end. So previously, right, the example would be a marketer would send a target account list. We would send that target account list probably all the same creative, and then we would look at account penetration and report back on that. I think where we're moving to now is being able to orchestrate a much more end-to-end process. And what I mean by that is bringing together creative insights and creative delivery, not just AI hyper-personalization at scale, but true creative insights, media activation, so being able to have an omni-channel approach to our key buyer groups so that they feel surrounded and connected to the brand. So particularly for challenger brands or smaller brands, that's critical in making them feel larger and more connected than they are. And then this is probably the one where we see the biggest barrier or where the most inertia is required to overcome the challenges, which is the connection between sales and marketing. So, we can do a terrific job, and we do as Dentsu B2B, and a lot of our clients do in marketing. But I think where the real advantage comes to personalization is having a connected end-to-end process between marketing and sales. Because it's all very well us delivering the trust and the level of personalization of needs between those different buying groups, but then the sales team completely ignore, say, the HR element when it goes to RFI, for example. So where we spend a lot of our time and focus is on making sure our clients are set up organizationally to work together. So having a collaborative marketing and sales approach internally in their own organization, but also just that data flows and that we can make decisions based on it. So, that might just be making sure our CRM contains that kind of personalization and information so that the sales team can pick up those things. It might be identifying those hidden buyer groups using superpowers, at which stage of the buying journey that they're at, and then deciding, perhaps we need a particular type of content to go to them post-marketing or in conjunction with marketing. It might be just helping that event structure and inviting the right people and all those kind of things. Those are where we see even our biggest brands, but also the challenger brands that we work with, finding much more value in that trust that they're trying to drive, because they are going beyond just dynamic creative optimization, for example, or AI scale, or working with our partners to just make sure we hit the right people, but to actually bring in that rationale for an HR or a finance or an IT person as to why they should trust company XYZ, but then follow that through right into the sales follow-up and even post-sales into product delivery. Because that's where you're going to get customers expand, grow, buy more things, retain, and also act as advocates for you for other clients too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting there when we talk about the availability of the data, the accessibility of the data to allow us to be able to do this, it naturally brings us to the AI topic, right? Which is, how do we as marketers get smarter? How do we do things at scale more easily? But I feel like there's a conversation there bringing it back to the human side, Mimi. You know, we must not get into a situation where we're using AI only as a tool for creativity and content, because that will bring us back to that sea of sameness in terms of content and messaging. So I'm sure you'll agree, right, that the human side of the buyers and the human side of the buying groups must always be at play as we're delivering these account-based flows at scale.
I think there's a whole other podcast in like the AIification of marketing, but just to pick up on Tim's point and bring that into this conversation. So orchestration requires PhD level knowledge and data flow and complexity, plus the United Nations of interorganizational stuff. And if you do it well, you get the Nobel Peace Prize and the Nobel Other Prize. So and that's why you need a Dentsu to do that for you. But you do have to be careful and be really sure that you're orchestrating the right thing. Orchestrating the wrong thing really well is not a success story. Buyability, to be buyable, you have to do two things, and they are both simple, right? They're not unstacked, but they are simple. One is, you've got to be famous enough in your category to get on the day one list. If you don't get on the day one list, it's like Glengarry Glen Ross. You know, like the winner gets a sports car, the runner-up gets a set of steak knives, and everybody else gets fired, right? If you don't get on the day one list, everybody else gets fired, right? 81% of purchases are made by people who've already made a decision, and they buy, and everybody buys from their day one list. And we did that work with Bain, so we know the inside of that piece of analysis, right? Be noisy, be truthful, do events, be visible enough in your category. Even if you're not the biggest, do all that you can to communicate size and fit, right? Once you're on the day one list, the problem changes. The problem goes from being competitive on price, competitive on product quality, to now there are 4 vendors, they all do the same thing. To win from that stage, which is consideration to closed won, you've got to be liked, trusted, and recommended more than the other 2 or 3 who are in your set. That's what maximizes your chances of being buyable. And if you orchestrate that through all the ways that Tim is saying, it's your maximum chances to win. There's not that much guesswork in understanding the buyer group and we've done loads of work on what they want. But actually what buyer groups want is de-risking. De-risking is evidence that you've worked for other people. If there's one actionable takeaway, it is the advocacy from your existing customers who you can use AI to chop up into little fragments so that they're customers like Mimi, customers like Laura, customers like Tim. That is your optimum chance. To be buyable, you've got to be famous enough in your category to get on the day one list, and you've got to be liked, trusted, recommended enough to differentiate you from the other people on the buyer list, because at that point, that's what will make the difference. Orchestrate that, and then we can all go on holiday to South America on the margin. Yes, and I think we should.
Well, I mean, I didn't expect to end on a holiday, but we will end on a holiday. We've been through Calvin Klein underpants, Indian weddings. We've talked about not getting fired, but hopefully listeners and those watching the content will have been inspired by a lot of the conversation. So thank you both so much. Please do reach out to Tim and Mimi. I'm sure you'd be happy for anybody to reach out on LinkedIn.
There's a crazy platform that, where you can go.
I was going to say, there is a crazy platform. And while you're on the platform, you can hop over to Dentsu B2B and obviously download the superpowers and watch the full content if you haven't already. But enjoy the rest of the series, and thank you both very much.
Thank you very much, guys.